Hi everyone, in this video I want to discuss three scenarios that could arise where you might want to make an unequal distribution among your children. My name is Eric Screwwala, and standard practice is just to suggest dividing an estate equally among your children, and for most people that's going to be fine. But I want to identify three scenarios where you might want to consider something different. Now, number one is if you have a large age difference between the children. And my personal situation is a prime example of where that becomes important. So I have four kids, and there is an 11-year age difference between the older two and the younger two. The oldest two being both in college at this point. Now, I've paid for them to go through college, and so if something were to happen to me before my youngest two go to college, then an equal distribution of the estate may not be fair because the older two have gotten much more financial assistance from me to make it through college than the younger two. And that can arise in many different scenarios. It doesn't have to be college, but college is one of those examples. So if you have kids that are older and have received more financial assistance, you may want to consider an adjustment to your plan in the distribution among those kids that recognizes the financial assistance you've given to some kids over others. So that's one scenario. Now, number two, and I'm also an example of this, is in a situation where you have a blended family. So in a blended family, I think there are two considerations. Number one, it isn't reasonable to expect that a step-parent would want their part of the estate to be given to your children. So in this case, my wife, I don't expect her estate to be divided to my two older children that I had in a previous marriage. And so that may call out for an uneven distribution in our estate. But even a second consideration is where your ex-spouse, the other parent of my two older children, has the ability to provide an even larger inheritance. Then you may want to consider an unequal distribution to make sure that you provide enough financial assistance to the younger two children, and make sure there isn't a huge disparity between the kids of the first relationship and the kids of the current marriage. And then finally, and I will say quite gladly I'm not in this situation, is as we get older, we sometimes have our children serve as caregivers to us. And occasionally, again, not my personal situation, but my mother-in-law spends part of the year living with my sister-in-law. So she's taking care of my mother-in-law in a way that my wife and I are not. And in that scenario, it's reasonable to want to provide some additional gift to that child for all that they've done for you and taking care of you later in life. And in that scenario, you might want to consider an unequal distribution. The point here is that not all plans are alike. Everybody has their own individual situation. And that's why I always say that the documents are the least important thing. It's about the planning that goes into it and really understanding what your situation is and what your goals are for you and for your family. That's all I have for today. We'd love your comments or questions. And until next time, take care. Bye.